Hi guys, Jared here from Humanised Recruitment Group. Welcome back to the Service Desk Forum for Q2. I suppose this one's come around based on recruiting for the past 4 years. Every manager that I speak to, we kind of have the same conversation going, is it easier to be promoted from within the team and look after your mates who are now your subordinates, or even moving to a management position from another business? And it's always kind of been a bit of back and forth, and everyone has their own kind of different opinions. But look, I think from that has kind of generated this whole forum specifically around that topic. I've been very thankful to have Tim come in from PKCG, David from Trans-Pacific, and Ellie from Multicap. I'm very fortunate because Ellie's been involved in some of these forums in the past as a viewer, audience member, and now you're actually participating, so that's cool. Yeah. And yeah, I think we've known each other for a while as well, since your UCQ days as well.
Yeah, definitely a few years.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll get the audience, the panel members, to go through a bit of a spiel as to, I suppose, who they are, where they come from a little bit. And then, we'll get straight into it. Tim, do you want to start?
Cool. I guess thanks for the opportunity to be here, Joe. So,
you're welcome.
Always been in the MSP space, pretty much my whole working career. So in terms of leadership and management, my first role was a company called Answers IT, moved from a sort of being a peer to the people, moving into leadership, found that really challenging. Whereas PK at the moment, I've come in fresh off the street to them and been able to sort of step into the team environment there and become more of the leader, and found that a lot easier. So,
yeah, that's excellent. How about yourself, David?
Well, I started my career in IT back in 2015 as a contractor on a 3-month contract.
Okay.
I liked it, I excelled in it, and progressively I've built up my career to a point where I'm now running the team.
Perfect.
And
that's the same company that you've actually stayed at and then you progressed at. Okay, that's excellent.
Yeah, so all in all, I've been leading the team for around 2 years now.
Okay.
Which obviously has had its challenges. We've gone through acquisitions. We've had staff come, had staff go. There's been a lot of changes, but all in all, very, very successful.
That's excellent. And I think that's really, really cool to hear that you started off as a contractor for 3 months, and there's been so much progression since that time. And that's 2015, so 5 years, which is actually great to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
How about yourself, Ellie?
So before I was in technology, I was an event coordinator. So I was already in the mindset of coordinating things and having several plates spinning at once and working with people and maybe diffusing situations in that. But I definitely needed to be in the type of industry that was more challenging and would help me grow and learn. So once I jumped into technology, I started at managed service providing, but I ended up jumping around a little bit and working out that my niche is not-for-profit or community sector, that type of thing. And I really think that I ended up excelling because I was asking for that opportunity. So I've both become a leader, jumping into it from the existing company and kind of progressing, but then also going to a new company as a team leader as well. So I've kind of had both sides of that coin.
It's going to be very interesting to see your insights coming from both sides of the coin, as well as yours, Tim, as well. So definitely go into that afterwards. I'm very interested to see, I suppose, what your thoughts are to start this off in what's the difference between leadership versus management, and can you be both in that kind of position? Actually, instead of starting off with you, Tim, this time, how about we start off with Ellie and then work our way around?
No worries. I definitely think it's very possible to do both. I think leadership is an attribute within management. So leadership might be more of like a capacity or the ability to maybe guide people, and that can happen at any stage in a career, whereas management might end up being more authoritative and might have decisions that can actually be made and a budget against it, I guess, as well. So.
Yeah, I think leadership goes hand in hand with management, because normally you'll find if you have a manager that has no leadership skills, you'll generally find it will not work. You'll have high turnover, and essentially the whole team doesn't work well together. Whereas if you put the leadership into it, then it actually starts to work like a team,
Yeah.
which I think is definitely a positive.
You know, we say good people follow good leaders as well.
Absolutely.
People leave positions or organisations based on managers themselves as well. So, I mean, most of the time, there's other factors involved. But yeah, I definitely agree. How about yourself, Tim?
Yeah, I guess echo both of their statements. I think you kind of have to have both. You can have a manager that isn't a leader. And I think for me, what I've previously found as well is that management can just be a title as well. So you can become a manager as soon as, and as quickly as that title can be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And that's something I found in my previous role where I suddenly became the manager. It was taken away from me because other people stepped into business, but I was still technically a leader in that company because I still had people coming to me day to day I was, I guess, the person. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose, do you want to start us off about your story as to how you transitioned from that strong engineer into that leadership position?
For sure.
It'd be great to know, I suppose, why they saw you to earmark you to do that. But a little bit about, I suppose, the challenges what you would have found.
Yeah, so I guess this goes back to my previous role. Always sort of the first one there, last one out the door. So had that sort of drive in terms of input into the business. I guess MSP game, it can become quite, what's the word for it, competitive in some stages. But I think for me, moving to that sort of management position was sort of a natural thing. And I think that's what my boss saw in me as well, is that I needed that bit more authority because I was already a leader in the organisation, but I needed that authority behind me. Probably the biggest thing I struggled with was having to keep up my billable workload, if you will, at the same time as the management. And I think I did a lot of self-learning at that time as well. So rather than having a mentor or being able to go on out to a business course or something like that, it was all self-learning, it was all reading, it was all sort of, that's how I learned on the go. So look, it was definitely a challenge in that initial period, going from being a sort of a peer and a friend to the other technicians to being, hey, you're now the boss of them, right? So that initial transition from a friend to a boss, and in terms of like one-to-ones and stuff like that, was, look, definitely awkward. But I think once I got into the flow of things, it sort of came naturally, and yeah, I did quite enjoy it. So yeah,
that's excellent. Be definitely keen to hear about, I suppose, a bit more about the challenge that we found with those colleagues that are now your subordinates. But we'll probably pick that up in a tick, actually.
Sure.
Yeah. But David, I'd love to hear about, I suppose, your story, how you transitioned into that, and I suppose what you found.
Overall, I think I found it originally relatively easy to make the transition into a management role.
Okay.
But I think the key part to that was I had really good mentors at the time. Whereas I think if I didn't have that mentorship and those people that I could turn to for guidance, it would have gone a completely different way. And I think that's what has led me to have an element of mentorship with the way I lead. Because everyone has the capability to be a manager, but if they don't have that ability to listen to their staff, there's no point being a manager.
Yeah, I think it's having those care factors, the soft skills, the emotional intelligence behind it is what sets up a good manager. I suppose looking back at that, with you having a chat with or having those mentors and people you can kind of turn to, I mean, what was that really about? Was that more about, I suppose, when you're inheriting staff, and was it more of a challenge in that aspect, or was it more to do with, I've never come across this issue before, what do I do?
A bit of both. And when it comes to managing the staff that you used to work alongside with, I think that part was a fairly easy transition entirely because our team was so tight-knit at the time. So it was a natural progression, and they still had the element of trust with me.
That's excellent.
Whereas later on, I inherited a team as part of the acquisition. And that I found a lot more difficult because they hadn't seen how I worked in the past.
Right.
So they were used to essentially a dictatorship,
Yeah.
as opposed to a leader, someone that will actually listen to them and hear their voice, which I think definitely is something that they needed at the time.
How do you feel that they actually warmed up to that? And because obviously that's a very different management style to go off and for them to be used to. I mean, did they take a little while to warm up, or did they see the benefit behind it straight away?
Absolutely took a while to warm up to it.
Yeah.
I think it took about 2 to 3 months
Okay.
to actually break through those walls,
Yeah.
actually start gaining that trust, and for them to see that I wasn't out to get them. I was there to bring them all together.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose with that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there actually. I had a good one. Kind of on that same path as we spoke about before, so we'll come back to you, Tim, I suppose. Like, what were your main challenges when you dealt with those kind of staff members that were your mates, still are your mates,
Yeah.
and now your employees, your subordinates?
Yeah, I guess the whole I guess power comes into it as well. Whereas before they naturally be happy to do a job if I asked of them, but now it was almost like they thought it was a power play sometimes,
Okay.
which I thought was very, I guess, interesting because I guess in terms of my management style, very similar to David, I try to be more of that leader, approachable, not a dictator. There's nothing worse than I think a manager saying, when you're asked for something is like, well, I'm your manager, just do it, I expect it of you. So I guess probably one of the things that did help is more explain the why behind things.
Okay.
So the importance of a task, and not just because I told you so, it's more why it's important to get that done now. So that really helped. So
Might be us opening up a can of worms here. I mean, do you think that's a generational thing? I myself, I'm
Yeah.
Gen Y.
Yeah.
If I don't understand the reason behind it and the full complexity, you'll probably never get 100% from me. If I understand it and why I'm doing it, I'll give it my goddamn all. But that being said, like I know, having spoken to more managers that are more mature, have kind of that's their pain point and their challenge when dealing with younger staff. And I think in the IT support space, a lot of them are generally younger staff that are trying to move up into system engineering and those kind of realms. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think that could be potentially a generational thing? Or?
look, I think it possibly does come into it a little bit, but I think it's just important for in terms of sort of providing passion's probably the wrong word, but providing the why is important, and it brings out the drive in people basically. So yeah.
Okay, excellent. And long but not least, Ellie.
Well, I think quickly to that point, from a technical perspective, if you're looking at progressing through an issue or a problem, then from that perspective, you want to understand the full context of it so that not only can you put that Band-Aid on it, but can you fix it or do some root cause analysis or never let that happen again. So if you're already in it from that technical perspective of getting context, then it shouldn't be so different from the softer skills, from the process side of it. And I think if you're level 1, 2, 3, service desk, networking, security, whatever it is, then hopefully the mindset is a little bit more inclined to want to get that context and ask how and why, instead of I followed that knowledge base article, I clicked up here on the left and it worked. What does that mean? And so I think if we're already picking that up from that base level, then it's just a continuation of that really as well. And I forgot the question that you asked me.
That's okay. That's great to see you add into that. I think that's awesome. I suppose definitely keen to hear your story, how you transitioned from that. And I'd definitely love to hear, I suppose, in the past when you become that manager or lead of that team, but also when you transition, I believe it's at Multicap where you took on that team as that manager leader as well.
So there were a couple of different roles that I did that in. So I guess my initial transition from service desk into leadership role, I really think it happened because I asked for it. So from the beginning of going in there, I think I already had kind of worked out my niche and where I needed to be. Although I'm technically capable, that's not my strong suit. It really is the people space and the coordination and the de-escalation or escalation of things, whatever's needed. So I already knew my strong points, and I was able to make that known fairly early in. And I also felt safe enough to ask for that, I guess, in that workplace. So I asked for it, I got the training that I needed, and that was a managed service provider.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working with, when I left there, a company that we helped support. Somebody that worked there worked somewhere else, asked me to work with them. At that point, he saw that I was officially leading that team, made an assumption, asked me to lead over here, and I did, and it worked out really well for me. So that kind of, I've gone into a few different companies as a leader, and I've been able to, I think what I do is take what I think works really, really well, and I want to use it in the next place, but it never balances out. So I'm like, this worked so great over here, I'm going to bring it over here and it's going to be fantastic. Oh, wait a minute, this is a whole different environment.
Yeah.
So definitely asking questions, being in the trenches a little bit. I definitely don't want to invalidate anybody's time and say this task should have taken you this long. So I need to be in the trenches to a point.
Yeah.
But still just communicate the same way that I would in any instance. So that way it's a lot more authentic, it's a lot more genuine. Just open communication as often as possible. In the appropriate way, I guess, as well. It's really working out the difference between being somebody's friend and being friendly with them. And so we have team building events, and there's difference between having a beer with your colleagues and Facebook messaging each other and stuff. So just working that out, I didn't find to be too difficult. But again, my niche is more people than technology, although I love the field that I'm in. So, yeah.
You raised a really good point before about putting your hand up, making it well known. This is my strength, this is what I enjoy, I want to continue going down that path. I suppose I'd love to know what you did to put your hand up. Like, was it more about identifying it and saying to your manager, just hey, thought about this the other day, I'd like to do it? Or was it something that you were introducing into your performance appraisals and that type of stuff? I mean, how did you do it?
So I very strongly remember in the early days of me learning what even is Active Directory, like basic stuff that I would say, great, I've learned what you've told me, now give me more. So continually asking for more, but then specifically keeping an eye out for some of those tasks that other people just really didn't like to do. So I do really enjoy doing the worst first. I enjoy some of those really mundane tasks. So I might ask for, how do you do that really annoying backups report that everybody doesn't want to do?
Yeah.
And in doing that, that gives the team leads at that point a little bit of a light bulb, like she's interested maybe. But then also, because I asked for that, I hadn't necessarily anticipated that that's what I wanted to do yet. It just kind of came naturally from that point. And so in those conversations, I might say, hey, I've noticed this person over here is a team lead and they're looking to go somewhere else. I've learned as much as I can up until this point. Can I learn what they're doing now? And just continue on with that.
That's really cool. Very curious to see, I suppose, David and Tim, I mean, did you do something a bit similar, or did you have a different way of doing it? What did you guys find?
I personally did it in a very similar manner.
Okay.
I just kept asking for more, asking questions and learning.
Okay.
And as that progressed and I got to certain points, I discussed with my manager at the time.
Yep.
That was my intention.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in a leadership role. And when the opportunity came, then they gave that over to me.
So very curious to see, I suppose, for all three of you, what was kind of the runtime between engineer versus into a leadership position? Was it like a good 12 months or 18, 24? What did that kind of look like?
So I think for me, starting in that role was about a two-ish year period, so quite a long time. But I guess when I first started there, it was very flat, right?
Yep.
And I sort of replaced someone in that role, and he didn't leave for 6-8 months. So that's for me.
Yeah, I would say 2 to 3 years as well.
Yeah. I think the same, really. But then again, once I was in there, I mean, it happened quite a while ago, but there's been ebbs and flows since. And in different parts of being a leader, I've ended up kind of going sideways and doing a bit of an analyst role and then kind of coming back as well. But it felt like it happened quickly.
I was going to ask a question, I suppose, why do they choose you three to move into those leadership positions? But I'm kind of, it's a very similar kind of response that I've got from three of you. So it's very much like, put my hand up and made it well known. I've actually asked for additional workload because I found an interest in it and I want to alleviate any pain here and problems. I suppose, is there anything else that you can think of that, I suppose, why they saw something in you and chose to push you guys up?
I think I was able to maybe transfer some enthusiasm across. And part of that is because of the genuine drive for what I wanted to do as well. So being able to engage and being interested in the people side when a lot of people in our industry are not people, really. And so I think when we're found, it's a little bit left of centre, maybe.
So I suppose looking back on it, when you first made the move into that leadership title and looking after that team, do you recall like what was the biggest challenge that you faced and just go, wow, this is like I have to make a big call here or do something quite difficult that I wouldn't have done 6 months ago?
Performance management.
Yeah, I was waiting for that.
Yeah, I think transitioning from sort of working alongside people to now having to sort of being in that position where you not so much reprimand, but you have to try and understand from both sides of the fence as well, where look, you understand why it might have taken that long, or you understand why that mistake might have been made, but it's coming up with that sort of solution to make sure it doesn't happen again in future. That's probably the biggest thing I struggle with. Yeah.
Okay. How do you find they reacted to that? Do you think that they were a bit resentful, or do you actually think they took it on the chin?
I've got some great funny stories that probably aren't appropriate for camera.
We'll make an uncut version of it.
Yeah, there probably needs to be. No, I vividly remember that. Probably can't even share that, but like, I think it initially it was quite difficult, and I definitely had people who were needing to go out for dentist appointments and stuff like that quite regularly. So yeah.
Yeah, I suppose situations you find was it one of those ones where you've unfortunately had to let him go, or was it something that you've actually been able to kind of turn around into that solid performer again?
Look, there was one I was able to turn around, which is I guess a good news story. Didn't fortunately haven't had to. No, sorry, I'll tell a lie. I have had to let people go. Fortunately, within the sort of probation period. So it has been an easier conversation. But I think the biggest thing is sort of setting the expectations up front, being very clear that they're sort of not meeting those expectations, and then they kind of realise it themselves, right? So you go for that meeting, and they're like, "I knew this was going to happen." So
yeah. I suppose, David, have you had a similar moment or a similar situation where you kind of were like, this is actually a big thing for me now? Or
essentially the exact same. When it came to performance management, it was a very tough line to walk because you still had that peer relation. And then suddenly you're coming in saying, you need to improve on this.
Yeah.
There can be some hostilities around it.
Yeah.
For the most part, my team took it relatively well. It was something they knew themselves.
Yeah.
And because we had that rapport as well, they were able to take it in a positive light.
Okay. So that's worked to your advantage.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really good.
Yeah.
I suppose sometimes it's just being mindful of it, they're not mindful of it, and they just need that pullback in that aspect. Very curious to hear your one.
Yeah, I've absolutely had some stuff that are not as self-aware of the situations. Absolutely. I think it's something that I need to be aware of, that I will forever be learning how to do this as well. So as long as I acknowledge that I can't know how everyone's going to react in every way. That's always a really big thing. Making sure that I've done as much as I can and leveraging my manager and the people and culture team and not necessarily feeling like I have to do it entirely myself as well is really helpful. And I think a switch moment happened for me when and I think it's easy for people to say, but then you really got to feel it and be part of it, is managing the problem, not the person. And again, that sounds like a really buzzy word type of thing to say. It's not about synergy or anything. It really is about, sometimes there are personality conflicts, and sometimes that conflict is between myself and a team member. But it shouldn't be about that. It's about the problem, not the person. And that problem could be something that I have with somebody. It could be the other way around. And so just trying to make sure that balance is correct. And then I guess as well a little bit around confidentiality with pushing through performance improvement the most appropriate way possible is really tricky when I think getting into technology, I never first thought I would be a team lead. Very quickly I did, but at first I didn't think that. So I wasn't in it for this side of things, and so my brain wasn't there. And then all of a sudden, the duties are fine. I can learn that. I can learn all these bits and pieces. But the soft skills and the emotional intelligence is always something that I'll continually need to learn.
I suppose when I speak to IT support people, career progression, where do you want to go? Do you want to go down the system admin, engineering path, network, cloud, etc.? Or you got the leadership component. A lot of them tend to look down the leadership component. I think it's just that natural selection of hierarchy. That's what they see. And I think the challenge that when I have a chat with them and find out, and when I speak to other managers that look after their teams, there's a lot of, they say that the boot gets bigger each time it goes down. And I don't think a lot of those support people know and understand what it actually is like to be an actual manager and having to deal with higher ups. And there's obviously in every situation you get the good, bad and the ugly. I'd love to hear, I suppose, the ugly component. Let's all face it, that's what everyone wants to hear. But I'd be very interested to hear, I suppose, like even a time when you might have stuffed up, or what you've learned from that and what you do differently in that aspect.
I guess what did happen from a technical point of view, some group policy changes were made, caused some issues with map drives, right? Grand scheme of things, wasn't a big deal, but it did have a lot of, in terms of people looking at the problem, so a lot of hours wasted.
Right.
And I guess the learning for me out of that was sort of not everyone's sort of above the law, so to speak, and that's why I think process can be sometimes really important. And I think the learning out of that was not just for me, but for the whole team, where you can't really blame people, you've got to blame process, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Nice. How about yourself, David?
I mean, I have no doubt that I have done quite a few things wrong over time. Nothing obviously major. But one of the things that I've learned that I teach to my staff as well is no answer is right and no answer is wrong. And I think if I try something, I always go into that approach knowing that we can step back on it.
Okay.
So hypothetically, I want to change how call flows happen.
Yep.
I make that change, it doesn't work, not the end of the world. We can change it back. And my boss and my prior leaders as well, they have seen that side as well, where they'll go, okay, that didn't work. It's not the end of the world. You know, maybe we should try this next time.
Yeah.
Instead of reprimanding.
Yeah.
So I've been lucky in that sense, because I know there are quite a few leaders out there that, you know, that will throw you under the bus in a heartbeat.
Sure.
But I've been very lucky in that aspect.
Okay, that's excellent. How about yourself, Ellie?
I think going into a new business or a new team, assuming that, I mean, I'm coming in here because I'm a leader, and that means that my previous knowledge and skills should count for something. Where I need to come in asking questions and looking and learning, and so yeah, I think kind of starting from scratch to a point. I mean, obviously retaining as much as I can, but coming in thinking I'm the leader, so everyone follow my lead. So I think that's definitely something that it took me a few goes to work through.
Okay.
And then it's easier to say that once you're past that point as well. It's easier to look back at that. But then as well, acknowledging that the same way that I've spoken to a staff member in the last 12 months might have been the same way I spoke to a different staff member 9 years ago. And 9 years ago, that person took it very differently to the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And really trying to balance on that really fine edge around how very differently people communicate. And that has to come from me. It's not their problem. It's how I interact with them.
Yep.
That's where those personality tests kind of come into play. The HBDI one was really interesting, and it's really not necessarily about, right, so that's how you took it, so I see why. No, that's how I presented it to this person. So it really is something that I need to work through.
So you're referring to the DISC profiles.
Yeah.
And they're excellent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really eye-opening. And it's mostly people to people, but team to team, and seeing the balance as well is always really interesting.
So when you're taking over a team or starting to manage an individual, do you look at trying to introduce that DISC profile to get a good gauge as to who they are, and then implement, I suppose, how you communicate, how you manage, lead them around that?
Yeah, so our current team just recently did another version of that, and that came from the business. So different departments within the business are all getting to do that as well, and it's really interesting that everyone's picking up on that, because everyone's hyper aware, and we're all going around going, oh, my green side is really lit up right now. It's fantastic. And but even those, I mean, not for profit. So even the free versions are fantastic, and it's still something really fun that sometimes our team it's like doing a Cosmo quiz or something. It's just on a Friday we'll all do the one like, what type of bird are you? There's one of those, and it's not a Cosmo quiz. It's about how our brains are more inclined to work in certain areas, and who's more logical and who's more outspoken. And it's a bit of fun between the team to say, well, I think this person's an eagle. What do you think? And then it's also something to kind of take stock of and really go, oh, that person's an eagle. I've got to work this way with that person.
Awesome.
I'm not an eagle.
Peacock. I suppose going back into some of the challenges, I'd love to hear from yourselves. I suppose, David, on your side of things, obviously being promoted into that position, were there other people that you had to contend with from both of your point of views? Coming into a business, did you take that position? I wouldn't say take it away from them, but you essentially did actually, but yeah, we'll go with it. And then also similar to Dave's, where you've been promoted up, I mean, did you come across any resistance, any kind of frustration from other staff, other candidates who were like, well, I was going into that position, I didn't get it?
To a degree. I did have one other person within the organisation that was going for the same role as me, which was very strenuous on us, entirely because he was a close friend as well.
Okay.
So afterwards, there was a little bit of turbulence between us. However, we essentially worked it to find out what other options he had as well. So we took it as more of a learning opportunity. So we sat down, we went through why he didn't get it, why I got it, and actually discussed where he wants to be as well.
Awesome. Okay. So with that, I suppose, do you mind if I ask where he ended up going? Because it's great to see that you've been able to retain that individual. Because I know when I speak to other people, other managers that have come in and taken that position, usually that other individual that unfortunately has lost out usually leaves. It is quite hard, but it's great to see that you identified it straight away and have tried to help with the mate as well. So you try to help them, retain them, and then put them in the same that they're meant to be in.
They also went to leadership, however, with a different company.
Yeah.
But he went into an applications leadership role,
Right.
which turned out to be more suitable to what he already did.
And were you able to help guide him along that kind of leadership way to get him prepared to make that jump?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I suppose, how about yourself, Tim?
Yeah, so really early in, before I became a leader, there was an opportunity. An existing leader left, and I was like, I'm really good for this role. I'm gonna get it, and I didn't get it. Of course, I didn't get it. It was very early in. I was just too big for my britches, and I think it was really important for that to happen so that I could, learn from it. Absolutely. So, I think from the other perspective as well, going in and getting that role, as long as I'm able to possibly assist with development in any way, that's why I've also done roles that are a little bit to the left and a little bit here and there, because it's just the opportunity ends up opening itself. It doesn't always have to be so linear. So as long as there's staff development, then somebody might be engaged. Whereas in a previous role, it passed me by. There was no staff development. What is there for me? If I'm going to scratch your back, you've got to scratch mine too. And I want development. Not everybody does. And if that's what I want, then I'm going to go and look for it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I don't think it necessarily has to be in a negative, oh, those guys didn't take care of me. It's just, sometimes it's not in that capacity. They didn't have a position available. It just made sense that there was nothing available. So I'm going to look elsewhere.
So I suppose, did you ever come across a time where you've taken that position? Do you have somebody who was, I suppose, a little bit irate, or somebody who was kind of threatening to leave?
Yeah, a little. I think it's really easy to diffuse that in a conversation. That sounds not that easy. So it's in a conversation. We're all working with what we got. So the situation happened. Now what do we do with that situation? So I was lucky at Uniting Care. It's such a large department. There's so many areas that we could progress, and even just from a secondment perspective, we were able to bring people up and to go help with this project, go help with the security team, go help over here, and so that was really, really handy that we had that opportunity. Whereas where I am now, the team is much smaller and the opportunities are limited, but we work with what we've got. So this is the situation. What are our options? It's going to take this long to get from here to here. Help me help you. So.
Right. How about yourself, Tim?
Not really. I guess I've always sort of swayed towards that small business, being able to do a lot of different things, not just being sort of pigeonholed in that one thing. So I think the biggest organisation I've ever worked for was 16 staff. So in terms of competition, I haven't really come up against it, which is, I guess, nice. Haven't experienced that before myself.
Okay. Awesome. So I suppose the last question being, if you were to give advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Well, I think for me, it would be both don't forget where you came from. I know it's a bit cliche, but never forget when you were in the trenches yourself.
Yeah.
Because remembering that gives you a separate perspective. And listen. Listen to what your staff have to say. Because if they don't feel like they have a voice, they won't give their voice. And at the end of the day, I don't know everything, and I'll never claim to know everything, but they might know something that I don't. So always listen.
Yeah, that's excellent. You can learn off each other.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I'm practicing some communication styles and observing people a little bit more, a little bit earlier in. But then, also, just remembering the trenches. That's the trenches. Sounds crazy. But just I continually not invalidating what was there just because I'm over here
Mm.
now.
Yeah.
I think is something to continually remind myself of.
Yeah. Very humbling. How about yourself, Tim?
I think the biggest thing for me is a lot of self-learning. So I've only really just started picking up the reading a bit more again.
Actually, I was about to ask.
Yeah.
I know I said no more questions after
Yeah.
this one, but I'm very interested to hear like what books you're reading, what you'd recommend.
So look, my current boss gifted me a great book. Never would have thought to have picked it up myself, but it's Making of a Manager, I think by Julie Zhu.
Okay.
She's basically a Facebook designer in a very similar path to us, right? So she came from being in the trenches, so to speak, to because she was good at her job, it was sort of identified that, oh, you should be the leader of that team now. So it's about sort of her journey, what she's learned. By no means to the scale I'm working at, right? So she's working at Facebook. But look, that I think if I was to pick just one book, that would be the top. So, but yeah, going back to sort of the advice, I think read more, probably find myself a mentor as well. I definitely have learnt snippets from people and watching people sort of interact, but really having someone that you can bounce ideas off and just make sure that you're on the same page, you're not making a mistake with these things, and just getting that outside influence or advice is definitely important. So yeah.
I think that's excellent. That's really good advice. Like I said, no, I wasn't supposed to ask the last question, but is there any books that you're reading or you'd like to recommend to people?
So I'm not reading books. I'm on Pluralsight. So
Okay.
I
Yes,
love
that's awesome.
Pluralsight for my learning. I get into the videos. You can watch this video. I watched the previous one, and I think I pick up quite a bit from things like this and maybe podcasts and that type of thing. So I'd be looking around a little bit more with that type of style of stuff. And I absolutely learned a huge amount from a couple of mentors that I had. So
Right.
I think there's a book called Culture Fix by Colin Ellis. And the whole book essentially changes your perspective of how you see a culture within a workplace
Yeah.
and how you can remold it,
Okay.
which is very beneficial.
Right. And that's because usually if you want to change a culture, it comes right from the top and then it's going to filter down. I mean, is there a secret behind that where it doesn't have to act like that? So
To a degree. However, this is more so about leading the way.
yeah.
So if you make a change down the bottom, encourage your peers to make a change down the bottom,
Yeah.
then it starts flowing upwards.
Right. Okay. I see now.
Mm.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated for spending, I think it was been give or take an hour and a bit. So it's always good to have like-minded people come together and share their stories and I suppose the good, bad and the ugly once again. So thank you very much for coming on. That's been greatly appreciated from my end and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Cheers.